The church at its best is about community. The church at its worst is about control.
It's a red flag.
A lot of times we judge ourselves based on intent and we judge others based on impact.
Yeah, you texting crazy and they texting the same and you like, bitch, what the fuck you just say to me? But you're texting the same way.
Exactly. You got the same energy.
I've had so many breakups and I read my text back and I was like, yo, I sound insane. Like I'm ending every sentence with a period. I'm using like just aggressive punctuation and shit. Like I'm not screaming. I'm never like, full caps exclamation point, but I'm just like, it's way too terse. Like, yeah, we'll figure it out. That's fine. Like good enough. Like that kind of stuff in response to the other person. I'm like,
good enough is crazy.
Good enough is crazy.
Yeah.
Good enough is crazy.
Eddie, how was the food last night? Good enough.
It's wild. So I've had to work on that. You know what I'm saying? I've had to, got to soften it and be like, oh, you got to lie. You got to lie in text messages. That's really what you got to do. To be a good person, you got to lie more, I think. You know what I'm saying? You got to translate whatever's going on in your head, you got to lie to make it what you need the other person to think, because that's low key what communication is. It's not
Kristian
saying what you
put
think.
that in a sermon. I can see. He's like,
I want to tell y'all to lie more this week. I need to tell some more lies so you can keep a healthy relationship.
Right.
God told me to tell y'all that you just needed to lie more.
God put it on my heart.
Welcome everybody to Waving the Red Flag, the #1 dating, theology, and dishonesty podcast in the universe. It's your boy Eddie. It's Josh. It's Alvin. Joined today by the good pastor Kristian A. Smith. What's good? Thank you for coming through.
What's going on?
That was good.
I'm always concerned when I'm introduced as a pastor, because I'm like, oh shit. People gonna have some expectations and I'm not gonna live up to them, but let's go.
That's good. I mean, that's probably the good thing, because I mean, from having spoken to you and seeing your content, it seems like part of your work is trying to adjust, redefine, question those expectations. Is that kind of part of the brand?
Absolutely. A big part of my brand is being disruptive. So like I was, called to do a ministry for the people on the margins. And they're on the margins because the church has marginalized them. So in order for me to get the attention of the people on the margins, I got to talk in a way that's different from the church that marginalized them. And I got to be loud about it, because too frequently there are people who think and believe the same way that I do, but they won't be loud about it because it's not good for the brand. So, I took the approach that was like, I'm going to just go ahead and just say what I feel. Because I already got deplatformed. I already got canceled one time before.
Really?
When I shifted in my theology, when I evolved from the rule-keeping theology that I was raised in and started to explore something different, something more inclusive, something more authentic, and I started sharing that publicly and asking questions that my faith tradition told me I wasn't allowed to ask, I got canceled. I had a little itinerary back in between 2010 and 2013. I had a little itinerary as a preacher. And then I went to seminary and started asking questions and picking holes and stuff that just didn't make sense. And I got disinvited from all the churches.
It's so many plot holes. And just to go back to what you were saying earlier about breaking that mold, or like breaking that the expectations that's placed upon a pastor, I feel like it's not realistic and it breeds hypocrisy.
Absolutely.
Because the pastor is just a regular ass human being just like everybody else, but they're put in this role, either one, trying to act like they're holier than thou and living up to all these grandiose expectations and all this holiness and righteousness at all times. And nobody can do that. And then the people are looking at you as somebody who's not trying to do that, who's being like, I'm a real human being. I'm foot to foot with you, giving you a good message. But then they'll look at you and then, he might not be holy enough. We was joking about it earlier, but they might look at you and say, no, he's not devout enough. Like he's not
lying to us. Like
he's not lying to us and portraying this image that he can't even keep up with, or she can't even keep up with.
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle too, because the pulpit and the pew are both responsible, right? It starts in the pulpit where, you know, we espouse certain doctrines and certain ideologies that, you know, may or may not be healthy, and then the people internalize that and they hold the pulpit to the standard that we set, that we can't keep up with either, but we keep preaching it and then telling them they got to do it and they can't do it either, but they holding us accountable to what we preaching even though we can't do it. So we keep preaching it and they keep holding us accountable and we keep holding them accountable and preaching it when
like
ain't none of us really doing it.
Just double checking, because it's been, and I apologize, Pastor, but it's been a while since I've been to church. So which one is the pulpit and which one is the pew? Is that where is the pulpit where the people, the audience is, and the pew is where
the pulpit is like a platform. Yeah, the pulpit is the platform where the preacher stands, and the pews is the pews where people sit, the chairs.
Okay, I had it backwards. Okay, cool, got you.
This nigga didn't even bother to read some, like, didn't do a keyword search for like shit before you had a pastor on here.
I love it.
I will. Like, look, man, I was raised in the church. It's been a while, but you know what I'm saying. I know the cliff notes.
You clearly don't, nigga. Get. You just lied.
You're right.
Hey.
But you know what? It's a lot of people who are not involved in the church at all listening to this. So I'm the Watson. You know what I'm saying? That's for the audience.
What you should have said was,
I should put it on them
for the listeners out there. For the listeners out there, Pastor, can you explain?
Instead of making myself look like a dumbass, I should have said.
No.
So you know, some of our listeners might, you know.
That's exactly what we were just talking about. Fuck that. Don't you set no
perfect.
improper expectations on yourself, right? You let them know that you don't know shit about the church, goddamn. Because I don't either.
Just trying to figure it out. Shit.
It's somebody like that in my church who he wasn't raised in church, but he's found a home with us. But like, we a bunch of church kids, like born and raised in church. So
y'all using code language and he don't know what's going on. Yeah,
we got a certain lexicon that we don't even realize because we were born in it. It's just like words that we've always used, and we'll say stuff around him, and he'll be like, "So what does that mean?" And I'll be like, "Oh yeah, like
who is that?" Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
I can see it. So when you kind of got that like cancellation and that pushback from the kind of like traditional or the powerful institutions of the church, when you started pushing back against some of those rules, which I'm assuming had to do with like not just judgment but also maybe inclusivity,
Absolutely.
and you got disinvited, did that start attracting new groups of people? I mean, you said marginalized people, but I'm kind of wondering who are the people that you found like really found themselves attracted to you and started going like, I needed this message, and you're the first pastor that I've seen that didn't make me feel fearful for my emotional safety.
Yeah, absolutely. So the pillars of my ministry are anti-racism, LGBTQ plus inclusion, women's equity, and Bible criticism. So the two that get people the most is LGBTQ plus inclusion and Bible criticism, because Western Christianity is built around the idea of the Bible being perfect, beyond question, beyond critique, which is just a horrible way to look at it, because the Bible has always been subject to critique since it was created. And then, of course, the people in the Bible didn't have a Bible. Yeah, absolutely.
That's a good ass point.
The people in the Bible didn't have a Bible.
So that's, hold on.
And then they couldn't read. So even if there was a Bible, literacy wasn't a thing in those days. Only certain people could read. So, you know, a lot of times we're born into a belief system and we never interrogated to see what was going on before these beliefs became mainstream. And then we assume this is the only way it's ever been done. When in reality, we're just one blip in the history of humanity, in the history of a faith tradition, and that everything evolves. Theology evolves. Religion evolves. Spirituality evolves. There are some principles that remain constant, but everything evolves. But we're born into a space. I mean, think about it. When we was growing up, I don't know if y'all remember, but there was like this huge controversy about schools teaching evolution. Like the church was like so upset.
There was, that was crazy.
Yeah.
Is that still an issue, or are we good on that one now?
In some states, it depends. It depends on the state.
Okay.
At this point, Arkansas,
still some that
Texas,
are dragging
Louisiana.
behind.
Yeah, evolution. I mean, I still see signs. So I live in Georgia. So whenever I drive to Florida, you know, you go through these like rural conservative areas where they got billboards like saying we didn't come from monkeys. in the beginning God created. It's like, you dumbass. Like, that's not even what that's
thinking, Cap, that ain't even how it worked. Yeah.
yeah, that's not how it works. Like, the whole story is an allegory. It's an imagination. It's an imagination of how everything came to be, right? Like, when you look at the story of Adam and Eve, who was there to chronicle that shit?
God.
And then how did that get written down? Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Prophets. Via the prophets, Eddie.
Exactly. That came
Capitalism.
hundreds of thousands of
It's always
years
about
later.
profit.
Yeah.
It's an imagination.
Right.
Yeah, it's an imaginative expression of what happened. It's an origin story of a people, and origin stories are like folklore.
Right. That are meant to convey a concept rather than a literal natural history. Interesting.
And when you're taught that the literal nature of it is what's most important, you miss the power in the message because you're constantly arguing whether or not it's literal.
Right.
But
Instead
a
of talking
story
about
doesn't
what
have-
are we trying to actually be told here?
Right. We missing
Exactly.
the point. It don't matter if it actually happened or not. It's about the message that you should be receiving for your own life to be a better person.
Exactly. Like, there's power in the story of the boy that cried wolf. But that's folklore.
True.
That, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
but when you tell the story,
Everybody
it
knows what's
actually
going on.
holds weight. Yeah. And I look at the Bible the same way. Whether it happened or not, what's the message that is being conveyed here?
Have you found? Sorry, my fault.
No, sometimes it's a positive message, sometimes it's a negative one.
Yeah. Have you found so like that process of like trying to evolve with the forefront of scientific discovery of as we learn new things about the world and then have to kind of like reconcile that with religious understanding and stuff like that? Has that been difficult for you personally, or do you see that being a challenge for other people in the church to kind of figure out a way to have religious faith but then also deal with science and new discoveries and evolving technology and shit like that?
Yeah, it depends on the context. Like, in other spaces that I've occupied in the past, yeah, you know, it was difficult for people because of how we've been like theologically conditioned. But in the communities that I've curated, the Holy Smoke, Cigars, and Spirituality, the faith community, like these spaces that I've curated, that's common. Like, we embrace science and spirituality, and we don't think they're at odds with each other, but we think they actually, correlate in a lot of ways. Right. So I remember growing up when the evolution issue was like a really big deal, and, you know, it was in the news and people were campaigning and all
Bill
of this
Maher
stuff.
was making documentaries. Yeah.
Exactly. And I remember, so my dad was my pastor. I'm a 5th generation preacher, so I'm a preacher's kid. And I remember hearing my dad in the office talking to somebody else, but I was in earshot, and they were talking about the whole evolution controversy. And my dad's from the Mississippi Delta, so he had this southern drawl. He was like, well, shoot, when it come to creation, I don't care if it was evolution or Big Bang or whatever. I just believe God did it. Right. And that helped settle me, because it was like, yeah, why does it matter? You know, so I took my cue from him, which is why I'm grateful for him, because he wasn't like hung up on all of the rigid rule keeping ideas. I mean, he had his blind spots. We all do. We sitting here talking right now, as expanded as we are in our consciousness, we got blind spots.
Some folks do. Again, I know. I done seen everything that can be seen. That's me. I know about the pew and the pulpit, all that shit. I know what's going on.
He's presenting that as a joke. He's presenting that as a joke, but that's actually how he feels. He's actually
really
a
believes
psychopath. He really believes that
Right.
he doesn't have a blind spot. You know, he's just
They
going,
say I know everything from Alpha in between the Omega. I promise.
It's a number between 7 and 8 that y'all don't know about, but I know about it.
I believe
It's
you.
right there.
there's lots of numbers between 7 and 8, motherfucker.
See, Alvin actually
Alvin
doesn't have blind spots. That's the difference between me and him. He actually does know everything that's going on. I just think I do.
False.
No, he does believe it. He already made that joke that I believe it, so he had to lie like he don't think it too. He does.
He's trying to throw us off the scent.
He's trying to throw us off. No, that's false. I actually have a very healthy understanding of my own limitations. No, you don't, Alvin. No, you don't. Come on, man. We all know
Actually
it.
does sound like something he was.
Because it's true. It sounds like something I'm saying because it's true. You know, it's true.
I say true shit. I ain't never lied. That's the AB brand. Y'all want to do a little silly, shade room type look over real quick?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
I was actually really getting into the theologian conversations at this point. I don't know if I can go back. I don't know if I can even.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point. That's a fair point.
Well, okay. Well, can we? Can we? Because there was something I did want to say too. If I would have found Kristian, if I would have found somebody like you a lot earlier on in life, I would have been a lot more comfortable and accepting of Christianity and religion. Because everything, like, I've always been like a very just aware person, and stuff about it just never sat right with me about it. But my mom taught me how to pray, so I've always had my own personal relationship with God, or just with the Most High. And and this is something that I feel, like an actual feeling within my own self that I can feel. So I know it's real. But when I'm looking at the church as a construct, and just the church as a construct, religion as a construct, like, it's a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense. It's a lot of inbred hate within this system that's not holy, that's not godlike, and then it's a whole bunch of contradictions. So I just really appreciate somebody like you who cuts through a lot of that BS and can bridge the gap and just say, hey, no, like, we don't have all the answers, but this spirituality, God, like, these things do exist, and I'm here to communicate this message in like a way that actually does make sense and that's not contradictory, because we all have like the good and the bad. Like, nothing is a 100% anything, and nothing goes without question. Like, we should be questioning things. You know what I mean? So I think that's like really dope.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I get that way more than I care to acknowledge, right? Like, a lot of people tell me, man, and I met you years ago, I probably would have never left the faith. I get a lot of commentary from like atheists and agnostics who were once a part of church and then just couldn't take the hypocrisy, couldn't take the suppression, couldn't take the manipulation, and just said, I'm done with it, because they didn't see an expression of it that was healthy in their mind. And then they've come across me, and I just talk regular. I just say, look, that don't make no damn sense. And, it's okay. Like, we don't have to subscribe to that. And they're like, wait a minute, somebody's talking in a way that resonates with me, but they're coming from the church. It really leads to a lot of cognitive dissonance with people, because they don't expect that from me, right? Cisgender, heterosexual, black male pastor, like they just don't expect me to talk like that. So that actually happens a lot. And the reality is, the church at its best is about community. The church at its worst is about control. And unfortunately, we've only seen the worst expressions of church in a lot of times, where it's about how to control people's movements, how to control how they see the world, how to control how they move about the world. So a lot of people struggle, with their spirituality, and especially black folk. Like, we come from a spiritual people. So I know, I'm talking generally here, like, not every black person is hella spiritual, but generally speaking, more times than not, we are spiritual people, because that's where we come from. So even when we don't want to deal with the institution, a lot of times there's still a part of our spirituality that we hold on to. Like you said, your mom taught you how to pray. So there's something in you, like, that still functions. You just do it detached from community, because you've never experienced a healthy expression of a community of faith. And that's sad, because anything that you're passionate about, anything that you dedicate yourself to in any way, it's helpful to have community around that thing, right? Podcasters have community. I'm also a clothier. There are communities for clothiers. There are communities for education professionals. There are communities for everything. There's communities for people who are doing weight loss together, because being in community with people actually enhances the experience. But when the community is unhealthy, you're just better doing it by yourself.
And for the people out there, what's a clothier?
Oh, I make clothes. I'm a custom clothier.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah. So I make custom suits, custom shirts, custom shoes, like everything from the neck down to the ground, basically.
A stripper strips, a clothier clothes, basically.
That
type of. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Yeah. One takes it off, one makes it and puts it on. Gotcha.
Puts it on. Exactly. Off and on. That's what we do.
Yes.
And now Eddie's gonna like switch focus from like all of that, or like real deep conversation, to us talking about, is it okay to split rent? Let's go.
That's what I'm saying. That's what we got. That's what we got to talk about. Is Tyrese tripping or not? No, actually, I wasn't about to do that.
Yo, that's a crazy segue.
Yeah, I'm ready to go wherever you want to go. Okay.
We can
Nah, I want to see him like put the theological perspective on top of whether or not Tyrese is tripping.
Okay.
But before that, my question or my statement or whatever just was about community, because I feel like it seems that a lot of people are lacking community recently. Like a lot of what we talk about on this podcast is loneliness that people in general are experiencing, loneliness that men specifically are experiencing, et cetera, et cetera. And it seems like the church historically provided that element of community, but for several reasons, people have distanced themselves from the church for good reason, for all of the reasons that you kind of like talked about. So
Yeah.
I guess I'm curious of your view on the purpose that church has, like, as a space for people to feel not alone, as a place for them to go when they're having difficult times, for them to get social needs met, to have a third space, a place to fall back on when other elements of the system fail them, their job, their personal relationships, all of that. There's this other institution that you're a part of, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think at its best, what I try to provide for people in our digital communities, because like I said, the faith community is a digital church. It's a virtual community of faith. So I just try to provide spaces where people can show up and just be. Like it's not tied to a performance. You if you come with doubts, bring the doubts. If you come with questions, bring questions. If you come with curiosity, bring your curiosity. Bring your sexuality, bring your gender expression, bring your socioeconomic status, whatever that is, bring that. And then we have like one key rule in the ministry, which is that we respect and honor each other's lived experiences. So in our community, when you encounter somebody whose lived experience contradicts your theory, you take that as an opportunity to learn from what that person has lived rather than trying to impose your theory onto their lived experience. And that has proved to be very helpful because it's challenged all of us at some point. Like you don't come into our space and not get challenged at some point. I don't care who you are. I get challenged every day, and I'm the pastor. I'm the leader of the space, but like I'm challenged all the time to continue to expand because my lived experience is my own. And I see the world through a certain lens. But then when I encounter somebody else, right, like an example is when I was in seminary, I went to McAfee School of Theology at Mercer University, the Atlanta campus. And my Old Testament professor was taking us through this story. It's a very popular story in the Old Testament. The book of Joshua is about the Battle of Jericho, where the children of Israel were coming out of 400 years of bondage in Egypt. And as they came out of bondage, they went into this land that they called the Promised Land, right? Canaan. They was going into the Promised Land to get all of their stuff back. Now, granted, they have been in bondage for 400 years. And the scholarship suggests they never actually occupied this land that they called the Promised Land. So they were really going in, invading land that really didn't belong to them. But the story is told through the perspective of the victors. So they get to this city called Jericho that was surrounded by a wall. And the way the story is told, the Israelites marched around the wall and then they shouted and then the walls came tumbling down and they went in and they killed everybody and all the Christians celebrate. Look at that. God gave us the victory. If God can do it for them, then God can do it for us too. Right. But and when you're born in that, and that's the only way you've heard the story. That
makes sense. Yeah.
It makes sense. But then my Old Testament professor, Dave Garber, he gave us this article in class about the same story. And the person who wrote the article was indigenous. And they said, whenever I read this story, I identify with the citizens of Jericho inside the walls. Because I know what it's like to have invaders come into my land and commit genocide against my people and push the rest of us to the margins. And when I read that perspective of that story, I was like, oh shit, they got a point.
Committing atrocities in the name of God.
Just
and like
crazy.
We glorify it and that like bro. That's
the name of the game. Because it does, I mean, religion seems like religion has. I'm an atheist, but I do think that religion has a power to be a very positive uniting force for people. But for situations like that, it also seems like it's this double-edged sword where it's like it can let people rationalize crazy shit, like where it's like, yo, this was a genocide, and it lets you believe that somehow it was actually like a righteous victory. If you go, well, God is the one who told us that we were the chosen victors in this situation, and that can be dangerous for how you treat others. Yeah.
But if you were to contextualize it for today, it was basically a holy jihad. Now you say that in today's context, like, oh my God, terrorism. It's like, but we celebrating the same shit in the Bible.
Because it's a different, it's a different flavor to the God, and it's like,
Man, I heard something really good from Sacha Baron Cohen today, and he basically summed his story up of what he was talking about was if you can make people leave obscenities, you can make them commit atrocities.
Ooh, yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, because I didn't want to quote, like I've heard the quote of like it requires. Yeah, sometimes it requires religion or of a certain brand to convince people to do things that are immoral, but convince them that they're not just neutral things, but actually convince them that they're righteous things.
Yeah. And when you put God on it, then that justifies everything.
And you can't question anymore. So you can't have a conversation about morality anymore because, God said these aren't people. These are infidels. These are invaders. These are, occupiers of the Holy Land. We got to get rid of these. These aren't even human. So yeah, I really love the idea of what you're talking about, of being able to, one, accept all human beings as human beings is where they come from, and being open to questioning so that you're never in a place where you're like just using it as a tool of control. Like you said, it's about community rather than control. I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's really important. And it's difficult for people who come into our space because they're so used to being controlled that I've had a number of people who tell me like, I just been waiting for the ball to drop. It's like this space is too good to be true.
Right, they're waiting for you to turn on the Scientology and pull out the like,
they're waiting for the bait and switch.
Here's hell.
Actually, it's a cult.
Yes, exactly.
Dude,
I'm a really different kind of pastor.
Right.
I've been accused of being a cult leader so many times. I actually made content about it on TikTok.
That's
like
wild.
because what happens is when we see something different that we can't easily define, we just immediately go to cult. Right, but
No, true.
One of the aspects of cults is that they take away your autonomy, they take away your agency to make your own decisions. Like the cult makes a decision for you,
siphon money off of you, isolate you. Yeah,
exactly. So like they get you on a compound. Like my wife grew up in a cult-like faith tradition where they didn't have a physical compound, they had a social compound.
To keep you isolated from other people and stuff like that.
Yes. They tell you only the people in this denomination are people of God. Everybody else is the enemy. Don't fraternize. Don't go to the movies.
I'm going to ask, and we can cut this out, but I'm asking from a place of love because I relate. Was she Jehovah's Witness?
Nah, she was a Church of God.
I said Jehovah's under my breath too, and I was like, wait, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Maybe that was crazy.
I'm only saying that. I only put that out there just because I know about that explicitly from experience, just based on family background. But continue. I'm sorry to derail.
Watched out, bro. It's real.
Yeah.
I would definitely define Jehovah's Witness as a cult. No doubt.
Okay, there we go. Elephant out of the room. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Like they control all your movements. Any religious organization that will force you to choose the organization over your own family is a cult.
Yeah. That's a very clean and clear definition. There's no two ways about it. If that's what's happening, that's a cult.
I low-key feel like that's what a lot of religion does anyway, because they actively.
It's big bank, little bank shit. To be fair.
Yeah, because it's always everything. God comes before everything. even in an esoteric sense. Because like the pastors, I've seen pastors like have sermons where they saying like how they put God over their wife or over their family, and like make it like an allegory or something like that just to deliver a message. But I feel like that's the kind of programming for control, and that's another reason that why I fuck with you heavy. Like, you know what I'm saying? Just in this conversation, like the first 5 minutes of when you started talking, you make sense. You know what I mean? Because
It shouldn't be that rare. That's crazy. But yeah.
Right. Like someone sounds sane coming from the church. You know what I mean? So
yeah, it's unfortunate that's so uncommon. Yeah, it's very unfortunate, but it's the reality. When you put God on something, you can convince people to do almost anything.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, oh, well, God is the ultimate authority. So I developed a theological framework as I was going through seminary, and I realized how much of my theology was utter bullshit. It was like, okay, so there's a lot of my theology that is just dead ass wrong. But then there's an aspect of my spirituality that is real to me. Like, and I can't deny that. I can't deny the benefit that the church has had in my life. I can't deny the fact that most of my meaningful relationships in life were developed and nurtured in church. And that there are life-giving relationships that I have because of the church. So I was like, okay, is there any way to reconcile this? And in my studies, I landed on the greatest commandment in the Bible, which is like somebody asked Jesus, trying to actually catch him up in a lie. They asked him, what's the greatest commandment in all the law? And his response was, the greatest commandment is love God with your heart, soul, mind, and your strength. And the second part is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. And then he goes on to say everything in the law and everything in the prophets hinges on these two: love God and love your neighbor as yourself, which suggests that they're on equal playing field. Love God, love neighbor as self. They right there on the same playing field because everything hinges on both of them. Love your neighbor as yourself doesn't hinge on love for God. Everything hinges on both of them. So the Greek word right there, where it says a second one is like it, that word like in the Greek, it means of equal rank.
Ah, yes. Okay, got you. Like
Right?
it. Like, okay, yeah.
Exactly. They're equal, right? So what Jesus was basically saying, as I interpret it, is that your love for God is expressed through how you love your neighbor, and your love for your neighbor is a reflection of how you love yourself. And I get the most pushback from people when I talk about the importance of self-love. They were like, "Oh no, you can't do that." Oh
You
God,
be loving yourself.
Well,
Yeah.
okay.
taught the
Let me
opposite.
let me ask you this. So
yeah,
one of the things about spirituality that kind of clicked for me was that we're all derived from source energy, meaning that we all, you know, like God is within all of us, like that. The energy of the Most High is essentially kind of within all of us.
right.
So to love yourself, could that be to love God, and to love your neighbor
Ooh.
is to love God.
Because we're all expressions of the divine. If you are a person of faith, like, and if you take the ministry of Jesus seriously, a lot of people don't take the ministry of Jesus seriously because they've never actually encountered it for themselves. They've only encountered what their church told them about it. But if you take that seriously, then yes, the divine is in all of us. And like what Eddie said, you know, he's an atheist. So I don't impose that on Eddie, but like, I believe, based on my belief in the divine, I believe the divine that I believe in is also in Eddie.
And it's
Right.
and it's one entire thing, which makes, because what you were just saying, it sounds like you're pointing out that these two things are likened to one another because they are the same thing, and that
Yes.
they can't be in opposition. That you're not gonna find situations where committing to God and committing to your wife, your brother, your friend, whatever, are in opposition, because those things are one thing. Is that kind of the idea?
Exactly.
You wouldn't have to choose one over the other, because to do good is to do good. You're not gonna have to, take money out your child's college fund to give to the church type shit.
Right. Exactly. And all that is rooted in the importance of loving yourself, which is something that church doesn't teach at all. Because you gotta be taught to responsibly love yourself. Like when we come into this world, we're selfish. Babies are the most selfish creatures on the planet.
Fuck
Everything,
babies. Yeah.
everything revolves around them,
Yeah.
right? And
They don't pay bills. They don't do nothing. Yeah. No.
Yeah, like when a baby wants something, they cry until they get it. They don't care what you're doing. I don't give a fuck. You sleep. You better get up and give me this food, right? I'm not concerned about your rest.
Diaper now. Come on.
So we come into the world like having a understanding beyond our comprehension, because we can't even like really, our brain isn't developed enough to retain any of that. But there's an instinct in us that says, I need this. I need somebody to provide it because I can't provide it for myself. So we have to teach little humans how to nurture that and say, okay, your needs are important. And you also want to pay attention to the needs of the people around you and do what you can to help the people around you in a way that doesn't harm you. But
yeah,
we
that's a
don't teach
complex
that.
dance to figure out. It's not. Yeah, we act like that's some normal shit that you just know, but it's like learning how to love yourself without being a fucking maniac and treating other people like shit, and understanding that they going through the same kind of stuff as you. So you gotta love them, love yourself, not turn into a complete people pleaser or a victim of somebody else, but be able to balance both is very, very complicated. So
Very.
having a system
No.
to teach people about that is
Look, let me ask, are you able to break down the difference between unconditional love and romantic love?
My challenge there is I don't think they're opposed to each other. Like, romantic love can be unconditional, and then it might not.
I will jump in and say that I don't think unconditional love exists outside of parental to child relationships. I don't think unconditional love exists. And I will take it a step further and say that I don't think unconditional love outside of parental to child love should exist. Your love should be conditional. Like your romantic love should have conditions that rest upon, like if this doesn't get met, then I should move on and I should like
You treat
react
me
differently
wrong,
to those.
I'm hopping out. Yeah. I one thing I will say is just I think that sometimes kids have more unconditional love for their parents than the other way around. But I agree with the should part. But I think that bond from a child to a parent, that one is more hard pressed to leave. Like even people who have a strained relationship with their parents, there's still that little love thing that I want something or I want, and that doesn't disappear. I think that's unconditional love, that you can't let go of the need.
And I will say that, I've been very open about my relationship with my mother on this podcast. And I will say, like, point blank period, my relationship with my mother is strained. And I think that my sister's relationship with my mother should be completely fractured, and it's not. The thing that we all get constantly when we bring up complaints about how my mother like approached our like child rearing and all that kind of situation is that people say, well, she's your mother, like you should just forgive her. Like,
Oh no, absolutely not.
very consistently. So like I think that what you just said is like a very real thing that people internalize, where like they think that like despite anything that your parents have done, like where it's like, oh, like
That you
she's your
should
mother.
unconditionally love.
You
Yeah.
should
I
unconditionally
don't-
love your
yeah.
mother. You
I'm with you on
should
that.
forgive your mother.
Yeah.
You should like be able to look
Yeah.
past all this stuff. And so that resonated with me completely. So I completely understand
can I
that
draw
point.
something?
Yeah,
right
yeah,
there?
yeah. Because that actually
Oh, yeah.
tied to something that I saw you say, or actually maybe someone else. But sorry, go ahead. But it was-
Yeah, and I want to hear that in a second. I want to raise this question though: under what conditions should you not love yourself?
Ooh, hold on. Yeah.
Oh, shit, he done
yeah,
flipped the
hold on.
chessboard. He done.
Oh, wait a
You
second.
see what I'm saying?
Wait a second.
That's why
So
self
unconditional
love is at
love
the
of
core.
self is probably one of the few forms of you know what? Actually, okay. Can I try and fuck it up and try and answer?
Please
try
do.
And give an answer.
Yeah.
Okay,
Let's do
That
it.
did sound holy, but let me try and fuck it. That sounds
Turn that
Let me
shit
just
up.
bring Satan into the room real quick.
Come on in, bro. I think that I think that sometimes the like treating yourself as your star player, treating yourself as someone to be loved, because I believe in self-love, like in like a I've talked and then I'll go into it. Like I know, like not even on some arrogant shit. Like I've talked about viewing yourself as someone that you have to take care of, and that's how I approach a lot of stuff, and I think more people should. But at some point,
That's
you
a
got to
bar.
look at
That's a
yourself.
bar.
That's what I'm saying. And I think sometimes you gotta go, no, I'm kind of being a piece of shit. Like, and I don't know if maybe that means not loving yourself, but sometimes you got to go like, nah, I don't deserve to be viewed as right now as someone who's like cool, okay, fine, worthy of love. In the same way that if somebody treats me like shit, or if somebody's a bad person, I'm like, I can't give you the action of love right now because you're causing harm to other people. So if I, as a person, know I'm causing harm to others, I think once you make love to yourself completely unconditional, it can make you struggle to question your own bad behavior. And that's not a 100% pushback to what you said. Maybe it's just additional context. Yeah.
I think it's additional context because I really believe holding yourself accountable is an expression of love for yourself.
Love, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because you can never abandon yourself. That's
you can't. You're gonna be everywhere you go.
That's true.
And one of the big things I just wanted to like call to attention is the definition of what I think you all have in your minds of the definition of unconditional love and what that looks like. And I think that might be different from Alvin's definition of unconditional love is probably different from mine. Just because like I'm not saying, well, for me, unconditional love is not giving someone affection regardless of their own actions. You can still have love for somebody and completely remove yourself from their life. And giving somebody space is sometimes the ultimate expression of love, because when you give a person space, that allows them to grow and flourish. So there's a lot of ways in which unconditional love doesn't necessarily involve you actively forgiving somebody right there in that moment. It doesn't necessarily involve you liking them. Yeah, having access to your life. Like, it's just, I wish this person no ill will. I hope the best for you, but this is not serving me, and I'm doing this out of love for myself and for you, because nothing good could possibly come from the situation right now. I don't hate you. I have no hate, no ill will for you whatsoever. I love it. But yeah,
I want to dig into that a little bit, because I feel like that goes into conversations that I've had on social media in regards to submission, right? Mm-hmm. So I feel like a lot of times people do this thing, and I'm just gonna say it, where they do this thing where they warp the definitions of what things actually mean to fit their individual definitions of stuff, when words do mean things, right? Yeah. So like you have this thing where like people are like, well, I don't mean submission to mean like, oh, I do whatever somebody says. I mean that submission means like XYZ in order to me. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. But like submission means something. Like words mean things. So I do think that like what you're saying, I think is valid. And I think what you're saying is actually extremely healthy. I think what you're saying is probably very much in line with like how I would probably view that thing in my life itself. Like I think me and you are very much aligned in how we view like what love should be. So I don't think we're at an impasse there, but I do think that unconditional means something, right? Submission means something. And I think that when we try to like subvert the meaning of what things are, like we get away so much from what those words actually mean. And it to the point where like we could make things absolutely meaningless if we just say like, oh, I just have a personal definition of what everything means.
That feels a little bit. So I'm very much like a descriptivist, I guess, when it comes to language and stuff like that. I'm like, sometimes words need to be subverted. Like sometimes you have to redefine,
which is fair.
Go, here's what we mean, or here's what we need this thing to mean. So I'm, I think
word meanings change, and word meanings can change based on context. Yeah,
drastically across time, and it's like, so I'm like, if this what you mean by love or submission, then cool. Maybe we don't even have a disagreement. Like I'm just concerned with the idea, so we can pick another word so we're talking about the same thing. But if for you submission means that thing, cool. I will say to your point, I think sometimes people are bullshitting. They're using a word to invoke the traditional meaning, and when you call them on it, they use this other little secondary definition to mean, oh, but this is what it means to me, so they can get away with kind of having it both ways, and that I do disagree with.
And I think to that point, so I agree with you, but like me and Josh are basically locked up in like how we think like things should be. Like me and Josh are very much aligned. But
so like the word to your point doesn't make a difference. Yeah.
It's just semantics.
And just a quick like little add on, like I learned that concept from Eckhart Tolle in The Power of Now, and just like other like books on spirituality. So I'm y'all knew me. I be butchering the shit that I be learning when I'm actually trying to express it on a live platform. You feel me? But yeah, so that
we're there,
the concept,
man. We're locked out.
Yeah.
Now, what I want to ask you about is, so we talked about unconditional love. What about conditional fuck you? Because I think that's the thing that I'm trying to figure out.
fuck you.
Yeah, because I'm not sure I agree with your, like, I think sometimes it's like, yo, no, I don't love you no more. I'm not loving you from a distance. I'm not, you're in my heart, but we don't have access to me, and I don't. It's a conditional fuck you. You've taken this set of actions in my life, and it's not just that you don't have physical access to me. You no longer have emotional access to my heart because you're not a person who treated me right. And, and I'm putting myself as the victim in this situation, but if somebody else tells me, yo, fuck you, I don't want you in my life either because of XYZ reason, I'm not going, oh, well, you really love me from a distance. Maybe I fucked around and I'm in an unconditional fuck you. I tend to think that's okay, but I'm curious what y'all think.
I think it's fine. I think it's important for us to understand what basic assumptions do we bring to the concept of love. Because everybody has their own basic assumptions about what love is. Like going back to even the concept of forgiveness, right? That's something that gets butchered a lot in religious spaces. So what I tried to do is create a working definition for people to process when they're thinking about what does forgiveness look like. So I break down forgiveness into like 3 stages. And the first one is, I mean you no harm, right? If I forgive you, I mean you no harm. That's
I like
number
that
one.
A lot. No active desire to harm. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the second part of forgiveness is, I wish you no harm. So not only I'm not gonna try to actively get you back, but I'm not gonna.
That's good.
Yeah,
that's good. These two
I
pillars are really good.
because I thought I was good when you said that first one. I was like, okay, cool, I'll do you no harm. Then you said,
Right.
I don't wish you no harm. I was like, I got some more forgiveness.
I still want karma to hit your ass.
Yeah.
I like that. That's really good. I wish you no harm. Yeah.
Karma gonna do what it's gonna do, but I'm not gonna give it my energy, waiting for it to happen, taking my energy away from stuff that can bring me life and make me come alive. So I mean you no harm, I wish you no harm. And then here's the third part of it. I refuse to be harmed by you any further.
Bars, man. Bars.
So
Hold on.
Bars.
I got to
Bars.
go. He got to go call some people.
right? So
Josh had to go attend to some business with that one.
So in my definition of love, and from like a universal perspective, the first rule of love for me is do no harm. Like, because I'm a finite individual, I can't help everybody, but I can at least make a commitment to not harm anybody. So even if I excuse you from my life, which I have done on a number of occasions, particularly over the past couple of years, I done gave some people the boot out of my life. But
right this way? Yeah.
Exactly, because I'm not going to be harmed by you any further, but I'm still making a commitment myself not to harm you, which is an expression of love, because I have every right to harm you based on how you harm me. I got every right to beat your ass based on how you harm me, right? But I'm choosing not to go that path, not to go that route.
That's the shotgun preaching, goddamn. Yeah, no. Now, okay, so this is a thing that I think everybody has probably dealt with, and myself as well. Reconciling that first part of forgiveness with that last part of forgiveness, because I think sometimes there's this form of guilt tripping. I've seen it in the church. I've seen it in family structures. I've seen it in relationships where they say that you no longer allowing me to harm. They don't say it this way, but when you break it down is what they're essentially saying. You no longer allowing me to harm you harms me.
Right. And
so therefore, in order for you to not harm me, you must allow me to continue harming you. Now, obviously, again, it's not said like that. It's usually in the form of like, why don't you call your mother anymore? She knows she misses you so much. Or, you got to forgive the pastor because obviously he's the word of God. So what he did to you or what happened, in the past, you got to let that go because otherwise you're turning your back against God. These kinds of things. But what they're saying is you have to take on the pain. Otherwise, you're hurting us.
Yeah.
So how do you reconcile that?
And that's the problem with teaching people how to love their neighbor without teaching them how to love themselves. Because if I teach you how to love your neighbor and don't teach you how to love yourself, I'm really just teaching you how to enable other people's mistreatment of you.
True. True.
Because if you don't have a base of self-love to know how to set your own boundaries, but I'm teaching you do for everybody else, put everybody else before you, that's just a setup for abuse and manipulation.
For others to take from you and not give back. Yeah. True.
Because it's reinforced. It's like pounded into us. Everybody before you. Everybody before you. And I'm like, that's some bullshit. Like Jesus, and I'm saying this from the perspective of people who espouse that, claiming to follow the way of Jesus. Jesus felt self-love was so important that he didn't command it, he assumed it. He said the greatest commandment is love God. So I'm going to command you to love God. I'm also going to command you to love your neighbor. And self-love is so important to that. I'm just going to assume that you know it. So I'm going to use it as the standard for how you love your neighbor. Love your neighbor as yourself.
Right. They didn't even need a definition. It's an axiom. Yeah. It's a thing that other things are built on. Yeah.
Base level Goku.
You can't give to somebody else what you don't have for yourself. Eddie, if you asked me for $1 million and I wanted to give it to you, it wouldn't matter how much I want to give it to you if I ain't got it.
Can I know? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. True.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's the same thing with love. If I ain't got love for myself, how am I going to show it to you? How am I going to truly show it to you?
A human being like myself. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I got to understand how to honor my own desires, my own needs. I got to understand how to give grace to myself. I got to understand how to set boundaries with myself, because the more intimate your relationship is with somebody, the more difficult it is to establish and maintain boundaries. And that generally starts with you. You are the most difficult person for you to set boundaries with, because you be doing shit you ain't have no intention on doing. And you be like, damn it, I did it again.
Why'd I let myself do that? Yeah.
Exactly. Because you broke the boundary that you had with yourself. If you can't keep boundaries with yourself, it's going to be difficult to keep boundaries with other people.
Going back to that thing that I was saying about self-love and treating yourself as if you're someone that you're, supposed to take care of. I feel like the same thing goes with keeping commitments to yourself and maintaining your own boundaries to yourself. Like, if you make a promise to yourself, keep the fucking promise the same way you would as if you made that promise to somebody that you loved. If you made a promise to your girlfriend, to your mother, to your son, how would you, treat that? And if you promise to yourself, hey, I'm going to do this. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to, stretch in the morning, whatever it is. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to take care of myself and I'm not going to negative self-talk. That's as important as if you said it to any person that you love. Don't break a promise to you. Don't break boundaries, against yourself.
And too frequently, our doctrine instills negative self-talk into people. So, and my wife talks about this a lot. She has a support group on Facebook called Therapy and Theology, and she talks about it a lot in there, about how the church will instill an inner critical voice and then tell you that's the voice of God.
Oh,
so
God
you walking
that's
around doubting yourself. Yeah, it really is. It really is. You walking around doubting yourself, and you're getting these messages that cause you to doubt yourself more. And then you go to somebody who's in leadership in your faith tradition and ask them questions that they don't have the answers for. And then they just hit you with the canned response of, well, lean not into your own understanding. Right. You're supposed to
gaslighting. That's literally gaslight. That's spiritual gaslighting. That's exactly
what it is. That's
your
exactly
brain don't work. We gonna tell you what to think.
Yeah. We demonize the intuition. We demonize our intuition.
It's an abusive relationship. Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. And when I discovered that, I was like, I can't perpetuate this shit. There's no way in the world I can. So if I'm going to do ministry, I'm gonna have to be authentic to myself. And when I chose to do that, that's when I got canceled, because that's not a part of the business model.
Yeah. So when you say canceled, what was it, the church that canceled?
Yeah. Ostracization from the church. Yeah,
absolutely. Like I had an itinerary for a period of time in my ministry. Like, I was traveling the country preaching, but in my faith tradition, you don't get praised for rethinking. You get praised for creatively regurgitating. So don't challenge us to think outside of the bounds of what we've been taught. Just regurgitate for us in the most creative way what we already believe.
Right. New beat, same bars every day.
Exactly. Yeah. So when I came out rethinking and reimagining, it didn't fit into the business model. It was bad for the brand. And they were like, you can't come back to my church. So at that point, it was like, okay, so if nobody in my faith tradition is going to accept me, I'm just going to do this my way. I'm going to just build my own platform. I'm going to just
you can get a lot of support doing that, or will continue to do so. I know you've already got support, but it's a lot of people that will be hungry for that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, we working on it.
I hope this like really resonates with a lot of people. Like you get even more.
I think it does.
Yeah, like you just Once again, all praise to you, man. Love what you're doing.
I mean, I appreciate that.
I know time is limited, but like, can I ask a real theologian perspective on something?
Okay, he about to ask you. Alvin, he be constructing some questions. Get ready. Stretch your back, bro.
Should I be afraid?
Stretch your back.
A little bit.
Let me relight my cigar.
Yeah, exactly. Because he's going to ask you some complicated shit. Well, according to the doctrine set forth in scriptures here.
And when you combine that with quantum physics.
Yeah, it's also going to have some science shit in it. It's going to have economic policy in it. Go ahead.
I swear
I'll tell you this, Alvin. I'm going to give you an honest answer. And if my honest answer is I don't know, that's exactly what the hell I'm gonna tell you.
Here we go.
Yeah, like honestly, if we could end it there, that probably is better for the pod. But no. But so I do work in Kentucky, in the Kentucky area, and in Wilmore, Kentucky, I've been very fascinated by what a lot of people are calling a revival in Wilmore, Kentucky. Like it's gotten pretty like decent like traction from the national media. Even we've had like the New York Times has done a piece on it. MSNBC has done a piece on it. So two things, and this is strictly from a theologian perspective that I really want to hear from it. One, can you really call something a revival while it's happening? It's something that I've been struggling with. Like as a person with a Christian background, can you really call something a revival while it's actually happening? Because it's my understanding that a revival has to happen over time. And then what are your thoughts on the fact that this has become like a TikTok phenomenon, like a social media phenomenon? Like from my perspective, it just doesn't feel organic. And I always have that like organic feel about it. Like I've went to certain stuff like in Wilmore, Kentucky about it. It just don't really feel like it's in the tradition. You know what I mean? Like, like there's no altar calls. It's just like people like coming in here, like filming videos and that kind of stuff. So I don't know if you're tracking to the situation, like what's going on, but it's been very fascinating to me, like that people are like this gung ho about calling this a revival and like what's really happening in the situation.
So I think you can call something a revival while it's happening. I believe I'm in the midst of a revival myself as a faith leader. I think the work that we're doing is reviving people's connection to their spirituality in healthy ways. The question I would go back to is, what exactly are you trying to revive? Right. And I think that's the question that has to be raised, because I don't know about the revival going on in Kentucky, but that's what I want to know. What are y'all trying to revive? Are you trying to revive white Jesus because you feel like he's dying? What are you trying to revive? Are you trying to revive manipulative control over people's minds? What are you trying to revive? Right. And then we can start to really have a conversation about the validity in your endeavor. What are you trying to revive is the question. I'm trying to revive people's love for themselves. And many times it's not even revive. It's like I'm trying to introduce them to love for themselves. I'm trying to revive a healthy love for their neighbor, because I believe that is the expression of love for God or the divine, however you refer, the Most High, the Creator, Father God, Mother God, Earth. I don't care how you refer to the divine, but like, I believe however you refer to the divine, the way you love the divine is in how you love your neighbor as yourself. So the question has become, what exactly are we trying to revive? So usually when I hear revival in a church context, I'm turned off, because like, what the hell are you trying to revive? Let's have that conversation.
Yeah, it's giving MAGA vibes a little bit.
Absolutely. It's like this He Gets Us campaign. I don't know if y'all saw them commercials, them ads in the Super Bowl.
No,
where they're trying to like, trying to rebrand evangelical Jesus. Right, so they're trying to play this centrist position of like, there's good people on both sides, but in matters of oppression, in matters of justice,
halfway point is just half wrong. Like,
yeah,
what are we talking about?
So it's like there is such a significant movement of people who are leaving the church. 1,200 people a day on average leave the church. 1,200 pastors per month leave the ministry, and not because they're retiring. A lot of them are just changing career paths. So this is happening, and instead of the evangelical church getting down to the root cause of the issue, which is bullshit theology,
and questioning, they're just trying to be better, they just rebrand.
They just rebrand. Oh, look, everybody, let's just come to the middle, and kumbaya. God loves us all. Let's not try to repair any of the harm that's been done. Yeah, let's just all come together and just start from here. No, there's been some damage done to people, and we need to make that right before we move forward.
No, preach. I'll tell you right now, if you're in a position where you are seeking faith, or you're a religious person, and the faith that's being offered to you requires questioning your intuition and second guessing your thinking mind, you might be seeing a red flag. And in the same way, if your ministry practice requires exclusion and control in order to get people to participate, you might be the one who's waving a red flag. There's been Waving a Red Flag podcast. It's been Eddie Josh Alvin. It's been Pastor Kristian A. Smith. Where can the people find you? What's the handles? Let them know what you got going on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. You can find me on TikTok and Instagram at the Kristian A. Smith. And if you want to connect with the digital community, just go to holysmokesmovement.com. From there, you can check out the podcast, which is actually like very similar to what we're doing here. It's a conversation amongst friends. So we do that on the Holy Smoke Cigars and Spirituality podcast, where we deconstruct harmful theology and build beloved community one cigar at a time. We have a Facebook group. We got a Patreon community. So just go to holysmokesmovement.com and just explore from there and see if it fits. But yeah, that's the way to get connected with me.
Let's do it. And look, for our listeners, thanks for tuning into this. Thanks for engaging in this. And look, subscribe, join the Patreon if you want to get bonus content. If you want to, join us on live with our guests as well to, talk, chop it up, etc. And as I've told those of you who are on the Patreon and on the Discord, when we get to 100 patrons, we're gonna have a little something special for y'all on this podcast. So see if you can get some friends to join. You know what I'm saying? And that's the pod.
Cop the merch.
Cop the merch. We got the gray. I was about to say we got the gray sweatpants.
The gray sweatpants.
We got the broccoli print.
We got half sweatpants. God damn it.
We definitely need to get sweatpants on the merch site. But we got the gray hoodie right now.
Nope,
we got
our
gorgeous
the gray
model.
Sweatshirt. We got the gray.
Oh, should I say? What did I say?
It's a crew neck sweatshirt.
Oh, gotcha.
This motherfucker, okay. You was almost flawless, Eddie. You was almost flawless, and then you start fucking up at the end, bro.
Hey,
I was gonna praise you. I was gonna tell you that this was one of the best
back to
ones.
full circle, man. Niggas ain't
human,
perfect.
man. We're not perfect. Any podcaster to tell you he's perfect is Joe Budden. So that's that's not what we want to aspire to. All right, that's it, folks. We'll see y'all next week. Peace.